Another Wednesday's come and gone, and I've got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9 Panel Grid. This week, we've seen extraterrestrial prison breaks, intergalactic political intrigue, and extra dimensional campsites. But we're going to kick things off this week with Absolute Batman #1, written by Scott Snyder with artwork by Nick Dragotta. So this was our proper introduction to the absolute universe for DC, seeing that we kind of dipped our toes in a little bit with the DC All-In Special. And I gotta say, it was a lot of fun. Nick Dragotta, I feel like, was the perfect person to take on Batman as a character because it's so outside of the vein of something that we've been delivered for that character for so long. Very kinetic, very action-packed. It's that crazy kind of like muscle bound Bruce that we've been introduced to, and Nick Dragotta renders it perfectly. I love his stylistic choices that he makes here because it really does deliver something totally new and different than what we've seen before. Now, with Scott Snyder being the writer on this and kind of like the architect for the Absolute Universe, I gotta say, it felt very much in vein to what we've been delivered as far as the writing aspects of a Batman book, though. There are differences between the character, but considering that we've seen Bruce recently down on his luck, lost his riches, lost the mansion, kind of feels there's some similarities there. And if you know Scott Snyder as a writer, he does come off a little bit formulaic too. If you're reading a Scott Snyder book, you kind of know how things are going to get delivered and how the pacing is going to be. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we also kind of know what to expect and when to expect it. So there's very little in the way of surprises. Overall, this was a really fun issue, though. It was a nice introductory chapter to the Absolute Universe, and, I'm definitely going to be along to see what kind of continues to develop from here on out. Sticking around at DC, let's talk Action Comics 1070, written by Mark Waid with artwork by Clayton Henry. So this is Mark Waid kind of taking over Action Comics proper, and I gotta say, I really like what he's doing and how he's playing with certain characters and certain tropes, if you will, in the comic book of Superman. This really revolves around something that, quite honestly, I'm surprised that we haven't gotten any kind of background on, which is the Phantom Zone, its origins, what it means to be in the Phantom Zone, and maybe what the inside of the Phantom Zone really kind of encapsulates. Mark Waid has been a writer for a long time now, but what I've always kind of, praised him for is his almost chameleon-like aspects where he wrote in the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and the 2020s, but in some ways everything feels classic and also things feel new and fresh and exciting. That's the biggest hallmark for Mark Waid as a writer, and that continues here. I love the way that he plays with certain characters, particularly Jimmy Olsen and his relationship with Superman early on in the issue. It's really good. I love the back and forth there. And again, Clark is a character and Superman is a character, and how they make the choices that they make that really are going to drive the narrative and drive at least this first arc forward. I was really pleased by that. Clayton Henry also, I feel like, did a really good job with these characters. Nothing is necessarily new. You know what you get with Superman, and in fact, I would argue that when you make big, sweeping changes with the character design, it's usually not met well. We've seen the Electric Superman. We've seen kind of like the no underwear on the outside Superman. Classic is right with this, and I feel like Clayton does that well. So overall, Action Comics, the first issue for this new creative team, I thought was really, really good. All right, next up, let's talk Crocodile Black #5, written by Philip Kennedy Johnson with artwork by Somnath Pal. So this is the final issue of this little mini series, and I gotta say, it didn't hit the way that I thought it was going to hit, but not in a way that they subverted my expectations, but in a way that kind of felt like nobody knew how this book should necessarily end, but they had to end it anyway. We continue with the character, our main character, who kind of has a struggle identifying as a protagonist or maybe the antagonist to his own character itself. Really weird dynamic that they have there, but that also kind of plays into the duality of the character as well, as he struggles with, bouts of mental instability. And that's really been the driving force between, throughout the entire series is how is this character going to get through what he has kind of wrought himself as his family has kind of, pushed him aside, or at least some members of his family has, and he's decided that he's going to take this new path here as, a killer for the mob, or basically, yeah, I mean, that really defines it. So I was kind of curious on how they were going to try to redeem our character or get him to seek help and, kind of have some kind of finality there. But again, there was nothing that took place that kind of gave any kind of satisfactory feelings towards that. There are some pieces of finality that come along the way for the storyline itself and some of the ancillary characters, but our main character is still an open book. And I don't know if that's intentional or not. If it's intentional, maybe we'll get a second series where we kind of further develop what's going to happen here. Otherwise, it kind of is what it is. Artistically, I talk a lot about the duality of the character in a lot of different aspects. Samnath Pal, I feel like, is the strength of this entire series and this issue, as he gets to visually show that in a lot of different interesting ways. This one, I feel like, is probably the best example of how he can do that, as we've gotten inklings of that in the previous issue, as there was kind of like this red outline of the true version of something or people that our main character sees. Well, now we kind of get to see almost like an entire world developed within that red line, kind of approach. And it's really cool. I think he does that really effectively. And I think that it really marries together well with the story, so much so that I feel like the story would not be effective, whereas the artwork done this way does make it effective. So overall, it was a little bit of a mixed bag, but I'm kind of curious. What did you think? And with our next issue, let's talk Geiger number 7, written by Jeff Johns with artwork by Peter Pelletier. So I was a little bit worried when I was looking at the solicits on this, because we have an artistic change, that Gary Frank is taking a little bit of a break here and we have a new artist. But I have to say, while it is an artistic change, it's not an artistic style change. And I feel like Pelletier really kind of stays in the same vein of what Gary Frank had developed for the series so far. Jeff Johns is continuing to really shine a spotlight on our ancillary character, the sidekick of Nathan. And I love what he's doing, because each and every issue, I feel like he's taking a brick away from the wall that Tariq Geiger has built, around himself. And he's doing so through just like his sincerity and sometimes even his naivety. But he's really kind of developing into this really great character that I feel like is going to really change Geiger in a worthwhile way. And we see that issue after issue. Speaking of issue after issue, I gotta say, I feel like Geiger as a series as a whole hasn't really even finished its first arc. It's more like Kung Fu with David Carradine. It's more like, he's going from town to town, righting a wrong, going on his larger mission. However, we haven't really gotten any finality to an overarching story. We've been delivered bits and pieces here, but that's not a bad thing either. I feel like it's still been super satisfactory for each and every kind of mini mission that they've gone on, as they've been delivered like a little piece here, a little piece there, and it's given the secondary characters a lot of time to shine, and I appreciate that. So Geiger, while it did have some creative team changes on here, I still feel like it held the high standard that each and every other issue previously did. Next up, let's talk Minor Arcana number 2, written and drawn by Jeff Lemire. Jeff Lemire, in my opinion, is one of the best writers in the game right now in delivering suspense and mystery. And he does that when he's drawing his own work and working with other partners as well. But this is one of those instances where he's drawing it himself, and it just works so perfectly. Each page turn works in a way that really is shocking and surprising and delivers something unexpected. He leans on the artwork as a storytelling mechanism more so than I feel like any other writer out there, as he really does not get verbose at all. There are pages with no dialogue whatsoever, but visually the story can be told. He's the best at that, bar none. This issue really deals with the mystery of the fortune telling or the psychic reading aspect of our character's mother, and maybe even our character now, as she reluctantly has returned to this town. She's taking on the role of being the psychic reader, since her mother has her own, issues that she is dealing with. And what our main character realizes, that maybe there's more to this. Maybe it's not so much of a con as she expected it to be. And she's also diving into this magical world that she doesn't fully understand herself. So she's reluctantly doing this. She's realizing that there's more to it, and yet she's kind of still battling that notion with that reluctant nature as she's like kind of fighting against even what she's experiencing herself. Again, overall, Jeff Lemire just kind of gets his hooks in you really effectively, and the end of this issue gets another cliffhanger where it wants me coming back for more almost immediately. Again, he's just the best at that. So overall, Minor Arcana, we're early on in the series, but this is really growing and developing already into something that I know I'm going to love. Next up, let's talk Phoenix number 4, written by Stephanie Phillips with artwork by Alessandro Miracolo. The series continues to surprise me as I didn't think that this is something I was going to enjoy, particularly because Stephanie Phillips has really never written anything that totally blew me away, but nothing that was really like, turned me off either. This series is kind of blowing me away. This issue particularly focuses on the character of Jean and kind of her struggles with the Phoenix Force, not in controlling it necessarily, but in understanding that control level. She has discussions with Captain Marvel, and they kind of start to maybe mention things that are really eye opening to her, as Captain Marvel had her own different power sets here, both with, Captain Marvel powers and with the binary powers. And in relinquishing power to those forces, is that giving power away, or is that maybe empowering yourself to trust the forces that you are in control of? A lot of cool ways that they're exploring that idea. Alessandro Miracolo, his artwork on this is, again, truly fantastic. I feel like he's probably one of the best artists in Marvel's bullpen right now, and each and every issue has really delivered something new and bold and exciting. This issue, we get to see the Phoenix Force in full effect again, as they've already taken on the Black Order previously, and now she gets to take on Gore the God Butcher, as the Phoenix Force can be seen truly as a godlike character. And it does so in such a fantastic way. Now, there are a little bit of nitpicks that I have here, whereas there are some action beats that I feel like, quite honestly, could have been splash pages that were relegated to, small little thumbnail-esque, panels on here, where it got a little bit muddy to read. Not totally the worst thing in the world, but I feel like they could have had like a bigger beats to really drive home what was truly happening. But overall, again, Phoenix continues to surprise me, and it continues to be, after 4 issues, probably one of the best books amongst the X-Men line. All right, let's talk Scarlett number 5, written by Kelly Thompson with artwork by Marco Ferrari. I've praised this book over and over about its not needing to lean on the Energon universe and all of the other things that are happening in the G.I. Joe books and the Transformers books. But finally, it had to happen. We had to get that interconnectivity. And I gotta say, I'm not mad at it. I appreciate the fact that Kelly Thompson has given us 4 previous issues where we got to know the character of Scarlett, know her motivations, know the connection she has with our other characters here, as it's really the trifecta of Scarlett, Jinx, and Storm Shadow. But we've gotten time to really get to know those characters before this issue, where we fully kind of dive into the interconnectivity. This issue kind of revolves all around them gaining access to this sword that is going to solve all of the Ninja Clan's problems. We don't necessarily know why, but Cobra's after it. Storm Shadow is after it. They know that it's important, and we learn that Energon is the source behind the sword's power. So we get Cobra introduced in this issue here as the other force that's coming after this. And we kind of know that certain things play out with Storm Shadow as a character, so we have expectations for how things will in turn play out. He's not part of Cobra right now, but will he in the future? Time will tell. Again, Scarlett and her relationship is so great, though, and Kelly Thompson is getting to write a story here that she's playing such a really great balancing act between Scarlett's needs as, a person who is trying to take down the Ninja Clan, as a person who's trying to kind of get her friend back, who is now part of that Ninja Clan, and keep her safe, and also make sure that she stays kind of engulfed within this Ninja Clan, because the only way to get this sword back and the only way to continue her investigation and her mission is to kind of stay ingrained. There's no pulling back now. So again, it's a perfect balancing act, and Kelly Thompson is doing such a great job at making sure that the storyline and the characters' motivations continue to be balanced. Scarlett is definitely one of my favorite books within the Energon universe. Jumping back to Marvel, let's talk Sentinels #1, written by Alex Packnadel with artwork by Justin Mason. When this book hit solicits, I was really excited because I'm a big fan of Alex Packnadel, and I've really liked some of the storylines that he's been able to tell in other books, specifically ones that take place in kind of a futuristic landscape that kind of revolve around technology. I think he has a lot of really interesting things to say about, the scope of technology. But this fell a little bit flat for me. It kind of revolves around some D and E list characters within the Marvel universe that have been impacted one way or another, but now they've been enhanced with Sentinel technology, and they're kind of almost like Bastion like characters. Bastion, the character from the late '90s run of X-Men, and there's a lot of cool ideas you can play with that, and I don't feel like they get explored enough, or at least not yet in this introductory issue. And maybe that's the problem. As an introductory issue, part of the duty in writing something like that is you got to get your hooks into the audience, and I feel like this didn't do enough to get the hooks in. There's little tidbits of things that are happening that like are worrisome for our characters and their ideas to explore, but I don't think it was enough to really make me come back and say, ooh, that's never really been brought forward before. That's never really been explored. Let's look into that more. It was a little bit of a rinse and repeat of things that I feel like we've gotten, especially from X-Men, more than once in the past. Justin Mason's artwork is clean. It's very stylized in the way that the Marvel House brand is right now, but it lacks a little bit of dynamism. It lacks a little bit of kinetic energy behind it, and that really would have helped the story because there are action beats here that I think really could have shined under the right penmanship. So overall, Sentinels didn't really do it for me, if I'm being completely honest, but my expectations might have been a little bit too high as well. Speaking of high expectations, let's talk The Terminator #1, written by Declan Shelvey with artwork by Luke Sparrow. You can't really have low expectations for a book like Terminator. I grew up watching those movies, particularly the first and second one, the James Cameron one, and it was, I don't know, a mixed bag for me. I didn't know what to anticipate coming into this story, whether they were going to really kind of dive into maybe the years that we haven't spent with John Connor, or if maybe we were just going to get futuristic stories that follow the resistance. And we kind of get neither. We get a story of this older couple who's been off the grid since Judgment Day, and they're just kind of trying to avoid the war altogether, and they've successfully done so up until this point. When a Terminator comes across them, they know they have to battle, they know they have to fight for survival, and we kind of get to live a day in the life of these people, but that's it. That's the story. So I don't know. Is Terminator supposed to be an anthology? Are we going to kind of just get to do this over and over and over? Because if that's the case, again, as a person who wants to know more about like the big players in the Terminator universe, this didn't do much for me. I want an overarching story. I don't want to just kind of dip my toes in and start seeing what Joe Schmo is doing. Tell me the big story. This doesn't tell me the big story, so I gotta say, it just didn't do it for me. All right, jumping back to the Energon universe, let's talk Transformers #13, written by Daniel Warren Johnson with artwork by Jason Howard. So we have an artistic change here as we've gone from Daniel Warren Johnson to Jorge Corona to Howard now. And I gotta say, I'm pleasantly surprised that they've been able to keep the style on brand here. Each artist brings their own stylistic qualities. However, it never feels out of kind of what Daniel Warren Johnson had put into play within the first issues. And I appreciate that because it never draws me out of it. There's nothing as stylistically changing that is like so jarring that you're just like, whoa, what is even happening? Is this the same book? This is absolutely the same book. And Daniel Warren, the writer, is really surprising me as I've loved his independent work. Do a Powerbomb is probably one of my favorite books of all time. But he's doing things here within this IP that I never thought I would say. Starscream as a character, I feel like we knew what we were getting with him, but this kind of like sheds different layers of that onion that is the character of Starscream, and we get to learn even more about him. We see the nature of war and how that changes people, and how the heroes of our story aren't always viewed through the lens of being a hero. And that is truly something special that he is bringing to this book. Because remember, this is an IP that was based on a cartoon in the 80s. To make things heartfelt, to make things really feel the way that they feel, is something special. Daniel Warren Johnson deserves credit for that, and Transformers deserves the credit for being one of the best books on shelves. Next up, let's talk The Ultimates, number 5, written by Dennis Camp with artwork by Juan Frigeri. So, Dennis Camp is working magic within this book, as I feel like The Ultimates has really become the linchpin within the Ultimate universe, but it still falls under the same trappings of each and every book, as each issue is kind of a snapshot in time over a month's period as we get closer and closer to the Maker returning. But Dennis Camp is really kind of doing the most effective job at that storyline and under those terms as we're building the team of Ultimates now. And I love the little subtle changes that we get as Tony Stark is still a teenager and he's kind of under the moniker of Iron Lad. Captain America, you can't really change that character too much, but the way he is portrayed here is still totally just perfectly Captain America. Now we're introduced to the new Hawkeye in this, and we kind of see that Clint Barton has, kind of shunned his responsibility of being the character. He kind of took what was given to him and said, no, thank you. So we're introduced to this new character who is way more bold and way more exciting and has way more to say about the nature of being a superhero and the nature of right and wrong than Clint Barton, I feel like, probably could have within these pages. Again, this is Dennis Camp doing things that are just different, but different in the right ways. Now, I've been critical of Juan Frigeri for his artwork in this book because I feel like it was the weakest amongst the Ultimate line. This issue changes that. I feel like this is the best artwork that he's put forth so far within this book, and I love the choices that he's making. I feel like probably one of my gripes was that there was no texture. Everything kind of felt flat, and the coloring was maybe letting the book down in that same aspect as well. Not here. He's bringing texture, he's bringing that grit. There's half tones that are being applied, and it all works out really, really well. It's not used overbearingly, but it's used just at the right times. And now, with that kind of choices being made, I feel like Juan Frigeri could definitely be amongst the hierarchy of the better artists within the Ultimate line. So overall, this book was fantastic. It was almost a contender for one of those top books here, but it was just shy because the top books were pretty darn special. And with our runner-up pick of the week, let's talk Public Domain number 9, written and drawn by Chip Zdarsky. I love how he's crafting this story, and particularly the characters, because their interconnectivity, even under the goofiest notions, really drives home how connected they are and how real they feel. Every character lives and breathes, and you know them. They're your neighbor. They're the comic book writer that you're reading here, and I love how he's really developing that and creating that. And it's not just the family of characters that we're living with, the Dallases. It's even just the ancillary characters. It's even the competition. Let's be honest, we know the writer that's taking over the other version of Domain, and that dude won an Eisner that was not deserved. We all know it. Um, the book just sings. It is really kind of like it's poking fun, but also giving like the biggest hug to everything about comics, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's all kind of being put on display here, but it's all being put on display in a very caring way. And I think Chip knows what he's doing. He has a way that could be like sarcastic and jabby, but a little bit fun too. Well, more than a little bit fun. So within these pages, within the terms of this comic, it just kind of sings. It's a beautiful love letter to the medium of comics, to the fandom of comics, and to the creation of comics. And each and every issue kind of continues on that same path as we're given new little tidbits here as we have a new creative team that's been put on the book within the book here. And, we're starting to build out more and more of those relationships. And the more we get, the bigger and bolder the ideas get that he can explore within the book here, such as attending a comic book convention. So Public Domain was absolutely fantastic. I loved each and every page. And with our top comic of the week, let's talk Precious Metal number 5, written by Darcy Van Polgeest with artwork by Ian Bertram. This issue absolutely blew me away. And as of right now, while I'm recording this, it is my absolute favorite issue of the series so far. We get every single character's motivation put on display here. We get every answer to all the questions that we knew we had in this issue. Granted, we get those, but it's kind of like thrown at you more and more questions on top of that are going to keep this story expanding here when we get the finale for the next issue. This was a fantastic display of mastery of kind of pacing a series, not just an issue, but a series alone, as we get kind of this fever pitch that then kind of just exploded within this issue as we see Sarge, our main character, kind of like start to understand all the inner workings of every single relationship that he's been kind of had to navigate throughout this series, with the woman who is a designer, with the church itself, with the boy's maker. Everything is put on display. Everything is kind of shown to you. Now that we're shown everything, we have more questions that continue to kind of expand from there. I love how they're just playing with all these different ideas and how this is all going to come to a culmination because it sets up perfectly the finale with the ending of this issue, that we're going to get something truly special. As of right now, this might be even better than Little Bird. Time will tell. We need to let it kind of sit. It's going to be something that I explore further with a reread from start to finish in one sitting. But again, as of right now, this is truly one of the best comics, not only of this week, but of the year. So that's what I've got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What did you read and what were your thoughts? Do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe, and be part of the panel. Leave me a comment down below. Thanks so much for watching. We'll talk to you next week.